Hi, my name is Anela, and this is my field story. So, we recently went on a trip to Palau, which was my first international trip with the lab. The weather in Palau was overall very calm, but there were a couple days where the current unexpectedly picked up. There was this one day in particular where there was really strong current around the entire island that we were surveying. And when there's current, the rig kind of becomes like a sail, and then it can be pretty difficult to manage. And then you also have to exert yourself more to swim, so you use your air more quickly. So we get to our first site, drop the surface marker float in, and then after a few minutes, we realize that not only has the boat drifted off of the GPS point quite a bit, but that we can't see the float anymore, which means that it was getting pulled underneath the surface of the water. So I jump in with my snorkel gear to assess, decide it's too strong to mosaic there, wind up the surface marker float, and then get back on the boat. We move to another site, repeat that process a second time, and again, the current's too strong. We go to try again on a different site. So now the third time I'm getting in the water and it seems okay. So we gear up and jump in, but in the 5 to 10 minutes or so between when I was snorkeling and when we jumped in for the dive, the current had picked back up. So we ended up getting in and then just aborting the dive immediately and getting back on the boat. At this point in the day, we still haven't surveyed a site, and the other dive boat had been to all the other sites that we hadn't been to yet and determined that the current was too strong at those sites as well. So we decided to go back to our first site of the day, which based on the layout of the island, we thought we might have a better shot at completing the survey there. So when I go into snorkel, there's still some current, like a decent amount of current, but it's not too strong. So because we have enough tanks on the boat, we decided to split the site into 2 dives so that we would for sure have enough air. So we also chose to take just the wide angle camera down and leave the rest of the rig on the boat so that it was easier to manage and easier to swim. To give you a sense of how quickly the water was moving, we drifted about 400 meters from the GPS point during our safety stop. So over about 5 minutes. But the overall dives went well. We get the site done in 2 dives. And then now, since it's been a couple hours, we head back to the site that we had aborted the dive at. One of our other team members snorkeled the site, gave us the go ahead, and then we head down with the full rig ready to go. Everything was going well at first, but after a few minutes, the current starts to pick back up. At this point, the full rig becomes too unwieldy, so my buddy takes the wide angle camera to go mosaic, and then I attach the rest of the rig to the pan floats line. And then this pattern of strong current, then slack current kind of continued for the rest of the dive. When my buddy was about halfway done mosaicing, she indicated to me that she was running through her air too quickly, so we ended up switching jobs, and then I completed the last half of the mosaic. So all in all that day, we still managed to complete 2 of the 3 sites that we were supposed to, despite the challenging conditions. A couple of takeaways from that day: don't get complacent with assessing the surface conditions before each dive. The conditions can change really quickly. And that assessment includes being aware of what the tides are doing that day, watching the surface marker float. If it goes under, then that's a good indication that the current's pretty strong. Watch how quickly the boat drifts away from the GPS point, and then sending a snorkeler in to assess in situ. But be aware that sometimes the surface conditions and the bottom conditions can be different, and that those conditions can change very quickly. So you try to assess the conditions from the surface and prepare as best you can, but be aware that sometimes when you enter the water, you might have to adjust. And you do have a couple options for how you can adjust for current. So if you're pretty sure that the current's going to be too strong, just right out the gate, you can just take 1 camera if you think the full setup is going to be too difficult. If you get down and it's too strong, you can mosaic just with the 1 camera and then give the rig to your buddy to string up on the pan float or to watch. You can switch who's mosaicing halfway through to kind of spread the effort and conserve air. If you have enough tanks and you know that the current's really strong, you can do the site on 2 tanks. So take 2 dives to do the 1 site, do half of it on 1 tank, come up, get a fresh tank, go back down and finish the rest of the site on that new tank. You also want to be cognizant of which direction that you're swimming relative to the current. So you might want to only swim into and then with the current and not perpendicular to it in order to conserve air. So you might want to make 2 passes the same direction instead of switching directions halfway through. Some more lessons, make sure you're communicating with your buddy and that you have a plan for what to do in case the current is too strong. And make sure you're really diligent about monitoring your air throughout that dive and make sure to check in with your buddy regularly. Keep monitoring conditions throughout the day. The tides and currents can shift and you might have the opportunity to come back to that site later on in the day and complete it. But most importantly, don't be afraid to call the dive. Safety is the number one priority. So if you get in and you feel the conditions are unsafe, then don't be afraid to make that call.